Hello and welcome to this video on the future zombie apocalypse that is already here, if you are an ant. A zombie ant claim is not an exaggeration. It is in fact the real-world demonstration of The Last of Us, wherein fungus is the underlying cause. It is a fungus that gets through all of the steps of a zombie pandemic and then eventually a doomsday scenario. Occurrence somewhere, infection, development of the infection, spreading infection, and then infection of a new host to continue the cycle. Okay, zombie ants refers to a real-life phenomena wherein certain ants can be and are infected by parasitic fungi that will hijack their central nervous system and then ultimately alter their behavior. It does lead to a gruesome death that benefits the parasitic fungi's reproduction. This isn't science fiction, but a well-documented example of behavioral manipulation in nature. It's kinda like how, say, Twitch thoughts will prey upon sad, desperate men and get them to give them money. This scenario is similar, with the only significant distinction being that the culprit in the case of what we're talking about is a fungus, whereas that's, well, a Twitch thought. The fungus called Ophiocordyceps unilaterus, often called zombie ant fungus, is the primary actor here. The primary being the keyword, as there are other species, let's say. It primarily affects carpenter ants, that is, within the genus Camponotus, in tropical rainforests, turning them into unwitting puppets that spread the fungus, but it's important to point out that that is not the limitation. There are in fact a number of other places in the world where ants are being zombified by related species of the cordyceps. The process is fascinating and has fascinated scientists for its implication in not just evolutionary biology, but parasitology and even, to a certain extent, popular culture. It has inspired elements in things like video games and TV shows like The Last of Us. In terms of discovery and history, it's actually fairly old. We've known about it for quite a while. The phenomenon was first described in the 19th century by British naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace. Understand, the 19th century is when they still were relying heavily on muskets and similar. You had, best case scenario, something like a Morse code in the telegram to communicate long distances, and things may still have been delivered by carrier pigeon. Okay, it's perhaps a slight exaggeration, but most of that is actually true as well. So we've known about this long before it became a modern thing, but it's gained modern attention through research in the early 2000s. Entomologists like David Hughes and his team at Pennsylvania State University conducted extensive studies in the Amazon rainforest, documenting the fungus's effect on ants. The term zombie ants became popularized around 2010 when videos and articles highlighting its rather eerie behavioral changes gained traction and became something of a meme and, well, viral. Or should we say, zombie. Ongoing research has revealed that O. unilaterus is part of a large group of over 200 species, with Ophiocordyceps fungi, each specializing to infect specific insect hosts. These fungi thrive in warm, humid environments like the rainforest of South America, Africa, and Asia. Remembering, however, they don't require that for all species. There are others that are much more resilient, for example, in the deserts or, let's say, inhospitable environments of Australia. If anything can survive there, basically the rest of the world is doomed. The fungus, Ophiocordyceps unilateral, entomopathogenic or insect-killing fungus from the order Hypocreas. It belongs to the cordyceps family, which includes species used in more traditional medicines, like Cordyceps sinensis, which infects caterpillars, but also weirdly is unrelated to zombie ants. Clearly, this particular fungus has taken a penchant to infecting hosts and taking over their body. The fungus, as a whole, is highly specialized with different strains adapted to specific ant species. This maximizes infection success. It reproduces asexually via spores and, as a result, has a fairly complex life cycle tied to its host. The infection process is what makes this so not only fascinating, but also terrifying. The cycle begins when an ant forages on the forest floor and encounters the fungal spores. The spores are just there after they've been distributed by a previous victim. These spores will in turn attach to the ant exoskeleton and penetrate into it, using enzymes and, to some extent, mechanical pressure. They will enter the body cavity, the hemocoel. Once inside, the fungus grows as a yeast-like set of cells, spreading throughout the ant's body while avoiding vital organs. This keeps the host alive initially, and allows it to function quite well. This is the Plague Inc. approach of keeping your disease low-key until you want to kill everyone. This stealth phase can last anywhere between 1 and 3 weeks, during which the ant behaves relatively normally and remains in its colony. It is a sleeper cell, remembering that this entire time all the essential organs and systems within the ant haven't been harmed yet, or at least not harmed to the extent that the ant is going to die prematurely. You want to drain them for as much money as possible, like OnlyFans. The fungus is, let's say, predatory in that respect. The fungus also produces chemicals at this point that will suppress the ant's immune system and response. This allows it to continue to proliferate unchecked. Then it goes on to behavioral manipulation, offering free pitches, or very discounted pitches, and one-time engagement events. Oh wait, we're talking about the wrong parasite. What we're talking about here is that the behavioral manipulation proceeds as the infection progresses. The fungus manipulates the ant's nervous system and muscles. This is what begins to turn it into a zombie. Contrary to early assumptions, the fungus does not directly infect the brain of the ant. Instead, it surrounds and invades muscle tissues, particularly those in the legs and mandibles, and it does so by secreting mind-altering compounds. These can include alkaloids or other metabolites that disrupt normal behavior. It's the male loneliness pandemic, except it's a fungus and ants. The infected ant will leave its colony, or in the case of a human, its parent's basement in a trance-like state, often around midday when humidity is optimal for the fungus. It climbs to a specific height, typically the underside of a leaf somewhere around 25 centimeters. For those who insist on freedom units, this is about 10 inches above the ground. It'll find itself in a location with ideal temperature, somewhere in the ballpark of 20 to 30 degrees Celsius, 68 to 86 freedom units, and humidity somewhere around 95% for spore dispersal. Once positioned here, the ant performs a death grip. That is, it bites down on the leafy vein with its mandibles in a vice-like hold it can't release. And this is the same way that various online creators will encourage their viewers to basically blindly follow them, and in this case, the end result is much the same, death.
It doesn't really matter how much money you make or how much money you have. That's really the thing, because I'm not asking you for a large financial contribution. If it costs $20 to sub, $20 is quite a bit of money. $20 is you can get a full meal for $20, and the difference of $20 and eating a meal is in that $20, like that's where it is. But a sub is $5. At maximum, in whatever your currency is, it's maybe $10.
The behavior is generally triggered by fungal overgrowth in the jaw muscles. In the case of some online creators, it's just triggered by not having anything in their brain at all. And certainly for some of their audience members. Okay, we're being a little bit harsh, but we're probably going to try and finish that tortured metaphor. The ant will remain alive for hours in this state, but the fungus will eventually consume its remaining internal organs, those organs it's been keeping specially for this occasion, and to allow the ant to function until now. It hasn't quite drained it of all of its material wealth. This brings us to death and reproduction. The two are typically the ends of, what's going to happen, but in this case, the two are not just the ends, but they complete a circle. After the death grip, the fungus kills the ant by digesting its body from the inside, slowly metabolizing its organs, tissues, and everything else, and in doing so, within 4 to 10 days, it will grow a stalk. This is called a stroma. That stalk will erupt from the back of the ant's head, growing to somewhere up to 5 centimeters long. And by comparison, it's somewhat similar to, say, how a mushroom fruits. The mushroom that you would think of as food is actually the fruiting body, and it comes out of the mycelium that are underneath it. They are the body of the mushroom. In this case, the body of the creepy cordyceps is inside the ant, and you won't see it until you chop the ant open. But much like a regular mushroom, the idea is to have this stalk or fruiting body release spores. In the case of cordyceps, however, rather than creating more mushrooms, the spores are released and they rain down onto the forest floor, infecting the new ants below. The positioning is there to ensure the spores fall in areas where healthy ants will forage, and therefore perpetuate the cycle. As mentioned, it creates a circle rather than being the start and end of a fairly linear line. In some cases, the fungus can actually mummify the ant's body and try and preserve it as a spore-dispersing platform, and they'll continue to do so for weeks. Imagine being locked inside your body for weeks on end, as something slowly eats you from the inside out, and you are at best vaguely aware of what's going on, and suffering the entire time. Yeah, this is horror show stuff, which is partly why it's inspired various zombie depictions, let's say. It does have an ecological role in certain adaptations though. Zombie ants play a pretty big role in regulating ant populations in certain ecosystems. What it does is prevent overdominance by certain species. Effectively, once it gets to a certain population, there are so many victims of this that the rest of the nest begins to collapse because they keep being killed. The more ants there are, the more victims, the more spores get produced, the more victims occur, the theoretically fewer, theoretically being the optimal word there, possible victims there will be because the ant colony shrinks. It should maintain a reasonable ebb and flow that way. It should being the optimal word again. The fungus has, however, evolved precise adaptations in order to make that happen, such as timing the ant's death to coincide with optimal environmental conditions. But ant colonies have not gone without trying to push back. They do have defenses of a kind. For example, grooming behaviors to try and remove spores, and in other cases, they will actively shun and isolate infected individuals. Kind of like how Reddit mods get isolated and stuck away on Reddit. It's so we don't have to deal with them. But of course, much like people on Reddit, this isn't always effective, especially with Reddit mods. A similar phenomenon also occurs with other Ophiocordyceps species, infecting spiders, beetles, flies, and each other with tailored manipulations. For example, it may make flies summit to a high point before the fly dies, again releasing its spores everywhere. This has highlighted the extended phenotype theory, where parasites influence host behavior and act as though it was their own fault. Now we should be clear about this twofold. One, there's no actual cognition in the part of the cordyceps species. They don't have a brain, but they clearly demonstrate some survivability. Second to that is that it doesn't have a lot of human relevance just yet. We should be clear about this. We say just yet for a very important reason. While it is dramatic, the unilateral species poses no threat to humans. Our body temperature is too high for them to be able to function. At 37 degrees Celsius, or about 99 degrees Fahrenheit, that's just too high for the species to survive. Cordyceps can't manage. And it also lacks adaptation for mammalian hosts. This means our immune system, our body, the pH, everything else, it's just too much to cope for it. Now, it doesn't mean to say, and we will point this out mostly because it is actually relevant for once, with climate change and global warming, the species will need to be better adjusted to higher temperatures, getting ever closer to what humans are going to have when they're alive. As a result, theoretically, if, for example, someone was to die, be infected, and presumably because their body should theoretically be colder being perhaps not quite the right description, but cool enough that the cordyceps species can survive and proliferate within them, it could theoretically open the doorway to human infection at higher temperatures if the species adapts to climate change better. But of course, that is a fairly protracted process and obviously a long way off. Certainly, humans have been using cordyceps anyway, so it's not like we're not unfamiliar with the species. The related cordyceps species are harvested for use in supplements, where there are claims of health benefits, but, the zombie ant variety isn't used that way, nor by any body ant, certainly no claims into its use, but there are some research applications that say its chemicals could lead to new insecticides and insights into neurological disorders. It could also lead to the future doomsday prophecy scenario, wherein the world becomes infected with zombies. In summary, zombie ants exemplify nature's weirdly intricate parasite-host dynamic. It blends horror with scientific wonder, and possibly inspires novel creations in various biological weapons labs. Ongoing studies continue to uncover the weird and fascinating molecular mechanisms behind this manipulation. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. And please do post any comments, questions, or suggestions you have below.